Welcome back, folks. Look, we're living in a time when communism is apparently progressivism, Democrats think men are women, and Kamala Harris is somehow still considered a serious politician. America is in its late-stage cringe era, and no one delivers it better than the vice president of vibes herself. Today, we're diving into her latest tour of gibberish, where the applause is dead, the logic is MIA, and the word salad has extra dressing of no substance. This is what happens when your party runs out of ideas and has to recycle Kamala's greatest hits, like angry glares, smug smirks, and sentences that sound like ChatGPT with a stroke. The Democrats may call it leadership, but it's starting to feel more like open mic night at Arkham Asylum. Let's take a look. Is it? Kamala Harris is back, folks, and if you missed her, don't worry, nothing's changed. Same smirks, same slogans, same speech patterns that make you wonder if her teleprompter was hacked by a preschooler. This time, she emerged at the Emerge Gala, fitting name, to deliver a 15-minute non-speech packed with platitudes, applause bait, and enough thank yous to fill a desperate Oscar reel. But beneath the awkward delivery and performative awes lies something more telling. Kamala's return is less about policy and more about preserving a failed narrative, one that the Democrat establishment is terrified to let go of, even after being thoroughly rejected in 2024. So let's be clear, this wasn't a campaign rally, it was a political seance. A room full of loyalists trying to summon back relevance from the graveyard of public trust. And when Kamala talks about Trump supposedly bringing us to a constitutional crisis, which she will do in a minute, or abandoning allies, what she's really doing is projecting her party's own failures. The economy isn't tanking, consumer confidence is rebounding, investment from around the world is going up in America, and people are working again. The real crisis is existential for a political class that built its power on fear, identity politics, and word games only to watch it crumble under the weight of reality. See, this isn't just about Kamala. It's about a broader cultural rot, a generation of leaders propped up by media echo chambers, DEI cult politics, and institutional cowardice who mistake applause from a curated crowd for a public mandate, who still think repeating buzzwords and fake outrage will win back a nation that's already moved on. They don't engage with ideas anymore. They stage feelings. They don't debate. They just declare to the wind. And in doing so, they reveal exactly why Americans, especially independents, have walked away from the left in droves. And what we're witnessing now is the slow collapse of a political ideology that mistook performance for progress, that confused Twitter trends with actual governance. And Kamala Harris standing on that stage, mouthing meaningless praise and basking in the glow of selective applause is a perfect symbol of it. Detached, delusional, and still pretending the country didn't see through it all. This isn't just cringe. It's the last gasp of a dying narrative.
In fact, please allow me, friends, to digress for a moment. Okay. It's kind of dark in here, but I'm asking for a show of hands. Who saw that video from a couple of weeks ago, the one of the elephants at the San Diego Zoo during the earthquake? Google it if you've not seen it. So that scene has been on my mind.
Really?
Everybody's asking me what you've been thinking about these days. Well,
man, that was hard to watch. Can you imagine if this thing were president? We'd be getting briefings about viral elephant videos during earthquakes. Yes, really, as if that somehow explained the state of the nation. But the real earthquake isn't in San Diego. It's the cultural and political ground shifting under the Democrat Party. And Kamala's still pretending nothing's moved. This moment matters not because Kamala is some uniquely powerful figure, she's not, but because she perfectly embodies the left's broader disconnect from reality. When Harris meanders into bizarre analogies instead of addressing concrete issues, it's not just a personal quirk, it's a reflection of a political class that has replaced substance with symbolism, debate with storytelling, and leadership with vibes. The message is always the same. Trust the feelings, ignore the facts. It's no accident that this kind of rhetoric plays well in elite echo chambers. Kamala's audience isn't the American people, it's the donor class, the media consultants, the nonprofits who've monetized social grievance and performative inclusion. It's the same crowd that championed her disastrous presidential campaign, buried her failures as vice president, and now hopes to repackage her as some kind of wise elder stateswoman, despite never having demonstrated leadership, clarity, or connection with the American public. What we're really seeing is the left running on fumes. They lost the narrative war in 2024, and rather than regroup with humility, they've doubled down on abstraction and moral theater. Kamala's elephant anecdote might seem like harmless fluff, but it's actually symptomatic of a movement that no longer believes it needs to make coherent arguments. They assume the institutions are still there, so the media, the universities, the NGOs, the corporate boards, but outside those bubbles, Americans are exhausted. Exhausted by being talked down to, exhausted by word salads masquerading as wisdom, exhausted by politicians who'd rather quote animal videos that confront the consequences of their own policies. And here's a bigger issue. This rhetorical style, vague, emotional, disconnected, isn't just annoying, it's dangerous. Because when politicians stop speaking clearly, they stop being accountable. When they default to metaphors and musings, they avoid facts, dodge questions, and confuse the public. That's not leadership. That's obfuscation dressed up as charm. So no, Kamala's return isn't just cringe, it's intrusive. It shows us what happens when a political movement loses touch with the people it claims to serve. It shows us how hollow the performative identity-first model of politics has become, and it reminds us why the cultural tide has turned, why Americans are rejecting the sermon and demanding the truth. Because at the end of the day, Americans don't need more parables about zoo animals. We need leaders who can speak with clarity, act with conviction, and stop pretending that applause from a hand-picked room equals a mandate from the people.
Including congressional leaders like Cory Booker, Chris Van Hollen, Chris Murphy, Jasmine Crockett, Maxwell Frost, AOC, and Bernie Sanders.
Ah, yes, Democrats are really going off the deep end, headfirst into the fantasy of a softer, gentler communism. Even the Soviet Union gave up on that failed system of control and collapse. China's version wiped out over 60 million lives in the last century alone, but somehow the modern American left thinks this time they'll get it right with enough hashtags, protest signs, and equity seminars. Kamala Harris listing Chris Van Hollen, Jasmine Crockett, Maxwell Frost, AOC, and Bernie Sanders as her inspirations isn't terrifying. It's just straight up hilarious. These people aren't visionaries. They're walking 2016 Twitter accounts with congressional badges. It's like watching a clown car trying to drive economic policy. They're not building anything. They're just tearing down the blueprints. Now, let's be honest. This isn't your grandma's liberalism. This is a full-blown cultural revolution dressed up in pastel blazers and TikTok clips. The new left isn't interested in fixing the system. They want to replace it. AOC even said it just 2 weeks ago. They don't want debate. They want to dictate. They want America's decline because they want to replace it with something that they consider to be better. And they're not pushing policies based on outcomes. They're pushing dogma based on identity and grievance. Harris invoking these figures as the moral compass of the Democratic Party tells you everything you need to know. The adults have left the building, and what's left is a coalition of activists cosplaying as statesmen. Now, what does this say about where we are as a country? For one, it reveals how far the Democrat Party has drifted from the center of American life. They no longer represent working families or common sense governance. They represent a ruling class that thrives on chaos, guilt, and division. The fact that Kamala still sees value in elevating people like AOC and Bernie, figures who openly attack capitalism while enjoying its spoils, proves the party isn't just confused, it's committed to a worldview that fundamentally rejects the American experiment. And that's what makes these people losers. Because when the people at the top are inspired not by pragmatism, but by permanent revolution, you don't get better schools or safer streets. You get more ideological purges, more censorship, more weaponized bureaucracy, and yes, more economic decline, as we saw in the Biden era. You get leaders who celebrate the destruction of traditional values as progress and sell the illusion of equity while consolidating control. But there is good news. America dodged this bullet beautifully in 2024. The bad news, these people haven't gone away. They're regrouping, rebranding, and preparing for the next cycle. And if we keep underestimating the cultural machinery that props them up, Hollywood, academia, and the legacy press, we'll wake up to find that we didn't just lose an election, we lost the whole country.
But sadly, we have seen quite the opposite over these past few months. Now, I know tonight's event happens to coincide with the 100 days after the inauguration.
Coincidence, huh?
And I'll leave it to others to give a full accounting of what has happened so far. But I will say this.
Will you?
Instead of an administration working to advance America's highest ideals, we are witnessing the wholesale abandonment of those ideals.
Well, that's rich coming from the former vice president who oversaw nearly 20 million illegal crossings at the southern border and couldn't even be bothered to visit it. But hey, that wasn't selling out the country, right? That was just some good old-fashioned demographic gerrymandering, if we've ever seen one, importing voters while lecturing Americans about democracy. Now here she is, back on stage, angrier than usual, delivering yet another garbled sermon about abandoning America's highest ideals. This is from the same woman who spent the last 4 years dodging responsibility, choking on her own word salads, and redefining leadership as performative outrage and curated photo ops. Kamala Harris isn't offering vision, she's offering projection. The left abandoned America's ideals long ago. They just can't admit it. They abandoned equal opportunity for equal outcomes. They abandoned free speech for speech codes. They abandoned borders, merit, accountability, anything that didn't fit into their endless narrative of oppression and grievance. And now, as their influence slips, they're trying to rebrand that collapse as someone else's moral failure. But here's the truth, no one's buying it anymore. You can feel it. The applause is thinner, the talking points feel stale, even the loyalists in the back row are struggling to look inspired. Why? Because you can only gaslight a nation for so long before people start noticing the lights flickering. Americans were promised unity, competence, and compassion. What we got instead was censorship, economic chaos, and a ruling class that talks down to us while cashing in. So Kamala's tone might have shifted from smug to scolding, but the script hasn't changed. She still speaks in safe generality, saying our ideals, our democracy, never defining them, because to do so would reveal how far her party has drifted from anything even moderately close to common sense. What she calls idealism is really just communist ideology. And what she calls patriotism is little more than just performance art. This moment isn't just about Kamala falling flat on stage. It's about the broader collapse of credibility across the left. The policies don't work. The slogans don't. And the voters, especially independents and working class Americans, can't be fooled anymore. We're watching the last act of a political movement that mistook applause for power, branding for governance, and manipulation for leadership. So the only thing being abandoned here is the illusion that these people were ever serious about actually building a better America for everyone.
So look, some people are describing what's been happening in recent months as absolute chaos. And of course I understand why. And it's certainly true of those tariffs.
Now, what's most revealing about this moment isn't just Kamala's inability to communicate a coherent vision. It's the fact that her party still thinks this kind of performance art counts as political strategy. They still believe that moralizing from the stage, framed by vague warnings about tariffs or abandoning ideals, is going to resonate with a public that's tired of being lectured and gaslit. But they're not listening to the American people. They're listening to each other. And the echo chamber is deafening. I think it's evident to everyone at this point that the Democrat Party's collapse isn't just electoral, it's philosophical. They don't know what they stand for anymore, other than opposing Trump and defending an increasingly incoherent set of cultural mantras. Equity over merit, identity over unity, feelings over facts. The result, voters don't see strength. They see desperation. They see a party that lost the plot and is now trying to cover it up with applause lines and nostalgic illusions. Kamala's speech, if you can even call it that, wasn't just uninspired. It was straight up incoherent. She sputtered through disconnected thoughts, empty slogans, and half-baked critiques about trade policy, none of which were grounded in reality or principle. And this isn't new. It's been her pattern for years. Speak vaguely, emote theatrically, and hope the media fills in the blanks. She's basically an actor with a very bad script. But here's what that tells us. The left has fully embraced politics as performance. The job isn't to solve problems, it's to appear morally superior while dodging accountability. And when reality comes knocking in the form of rising costs, broken borders, declining schools, they deflect. Blame Trump, blame Russia, blame misinformation, never themselves. Look, this moment should be a wake-up call, but it won't ever be. Because the modern Democrat leadership isn't built to adapt. It's built to preserve the illusion of control, no matter how hollow. Kamala Harris taking the stage to pat herself on the back while the crowd politely claps like it's an HR seminar is a perfect image of a party that simply doesn't get it. And that's not just a Kamala problem. That's a cultural rot problem, the kind that grows when institutions care more about signaling virtue than delivering results. When media covers for incompetence, when academia rewards dogma over debate, and when political success is measured by how many buzzwords you can squeeze into a sentence, not by how many lives you actually improve. So yes, Kamala's speech is embarrassing, but more importantly, it's clarifying. It shows us that the left's grip on the narrative is slipping, and all they have left is nostalgia for a moral high ground they never actually stood on.
This country is ours. It doesn't belong to whoever is in the White House. It belongs to you. It belongs to us. It belongs to we, the people. Thank you.
Aw, yeah, Kamala Harris is so back, at least in her mind, because she closed this speech with something that was clearly meant to be a soaring, unifying line saying, this country is ours. It doesn't belong to whoever is in the White House. It belongs to you. It belongs to us. It belongs to we, the people. Inspiring, right? Until you actually remember how she governed. Because while Kamala may have just discovered the Constitution in her post-White House book club, that's not how she acted when she was actually in office in the White House. She didn't lead like the country belonged to the people. She governed like it belonged to her party, her donors, and her narrative. She ignored the border crisis, dodged every policy responsibility, and spent more time curating her brand than fighting for the American worker. Her version of we the people was always filtered through race, gender, and identity politics, never through equal treatment under the law. And even in her speech, she couldn't stick the landing. She read the words, we the people, like a student forced to recite a line in class and broke character instantly with a chirpy, thank you. Like she was just wrapping up a high school play. That's not leadership. It's just a curtain call. It's a performance. The entire moment was fake right down to the applause because at the end of the day, Kamala doesn't believe the country belongs to you. She believes it belongs to the people who think like her, vote like her, and signal their virtue just loud enough to avoid any sort of criticism. Now, what this moment really reveals is how hollow the rhetoric of the modern left has become. They invoke the founding documents only when it's convenient, when they can co-opt the language without honoring the principles. We the people is supposed to mean all Americans, not just the ones approved by MSDNC. But for Harris and her allies, it's just a phrase to drape over policies that divide, control, and condescend. And here's a bigger issue. This kind of political theater works in a media environment where narrative trumps reality, where the same people who spent years calling dissenters threats to democracy now claim they're the true defenders of the republic because they can quote the Constitution with the right inflection. even if they violate its spirit every day. That's how detached from principle the left has become. They perform patriotism like it's a monologue, not a responsibility. So no, Kamala, the country doesn't belong to you. And it certainly didn't feel like it belonged to the people when you and Biden were in office, ducking the border, laughing off questions, and blaming Americans for your own incompetence. If you're going to quote, "we the people," you better start acting like it means all the people, not just the ones who clap on cue for you. So ask yourself, when the people who failed to lead now pretend to represent we the people, do they really mean you, or just a curated version of you that fits their script? How much longer will we let performance stand in for principle, and how many times will we fall for the same staged applause? This moment isn't just about Kamala. It's about a political class that still believes empty symbolism can cover for broken systems. But the real question is, will we keep playing along, or will we finally start calling the show for what it is? You tell me what you think in the comments down below. Hope you have a terrific day. Peace.